Oscar's Wallpaper, directed by Tandy, and it's essentially about the last days of Oscar Wilde. We've all heard the story that he had these great last words, which are I now have it imprinted in my brain, as you do too. It's like this. He was in a Paris motel, and he was dying, and he looked around and he said, "This wallpaper and I are fighting a duel to the death. Either it must go or I." And so the play is about a conceit that this just didn't come off the top of his head, that he worked at it and he really wanted people to remember what his last words were. So it's as humorous as a death scene can be, wouldn't you say, Tandy?
Yeah. And so you wrote the play. Let's see, what came first? The book.
The book, right? The story. It's a short story in my new book called The Last Temptation of Lincoln. The story in there is called Oscar Wilde is Dying, and essentially it's a collection of stories, kind of what-if stories from history that kind of play with the ideas of these very famous icons that you and I know so well, from Abraham Lincoln to Benjamin Franklin to Oscar Wilde to whoever else, and they're humor stories, but they kind of throw a light on how we look at history and how we look at these particular iconic figures also.
I have to confess, Oscar Wilde is one of my favorite authors of all time. He not only was a novelist and a playwright, but a philosopher. In my mind, I feel kind of maybe not like Sartre. Sartre was probably a philosopher first, and then a playwright or whatever. But Oscar Wilde seems to be a holistic kind of approach. What do you find in Oscar Wilde that?
Well, his career was so short in a lot of ways. I mean, he kind of came to prominence in the late 1880s, and by the year 1900, he was dead. And of course, he had a life story which is really heartbreaking. He went to jail essentially because he was gay, and he was betrayed by his longtime lover, this young man named Bosie. Actually, it was Bosie's father that kind of led the crusade to destroy Oscar Wilde, and he was very successful in that. And Wilde went to prison for several years, and he died pretty much penniless and hopeless at the age of 46. It's a sad story, really, but Oscar Wilde is such a life force. He was so indomitable that that kind of mitigates the tragedy of it a little bit.
Right, because his writings are so full of life. They're so passionate. He lived, I hope, life to the fullest when he was able to, at least his writing seems to express that kind of.
And defiant, too. I mean, he was kind of a middle finger to Victorian England. He just lived as he could in a time in which being gay was a criminal offense. And, he was, of course, an icon for untold number of closeted people in the era, and for everyone, just because of his artistic integrity and how he just kind of didn't really think of the circumstances of how he would act. He just acted as an artist, and I've always really respected that.
It's an interesting question I have for you. I'm thinking to myself here, 810s at 8 Festival is an annual festival. It's going on almost 20 years.
This is its 20th.
It is.
Yep.
The 20th. Boy, this is a big year. 2015, huh? We got anniversaries all over the place. So 20 years this festival has been happening. When you decided to write Oscar's Wallpaper as a play, was it so that it could fit into the 10-minute format? Is it the form impressed the play, or was it the play just happened to be able to?
Well, I've been covering 810s as a reporter for years and years, and I had never submitted to it, and they judge it blindly. So my name for good or bad would not be held against me. So I just decided, what the heck? I have this story. It all takes place essentially in one room, and it's essentially two characters. It would make a great quickie play. And as Tandy and I have learned, it was really tough getting something like that down to 10 minutes, but I think we've been able to do it.
Well, we're going to find out this weekend. It's premiering, is it premiering?
Friday night.
It is
January
Friday night.
9th.
And there's also a gala reception happening Friday night as well.
There's two shows that go on, and one opens on Friday night. And
that's the A.
That's A show.
A group.
Yeah. And then the B group, which is not hierarchical at all, it's just the alternate group of 8 plays, opens on Saturday night.
And it runs for the entire month until
into February.
And so Friday's the first night. Now, Tandy Beal, I need to ask you, how has it been working with Wallace? I know that sometimes there can be some conflicts in the theatrical world between the author and then the manifestation through the direction of the words. What has that been like?
Well, it's been a wonderful process, and I'm actually going to reel it back to the reading of the scripts, which it was a blind process, and we were told we had to come up with 3 that we really liked a lot, and I really had 2 that I really wanted to do, and you have no idea who's done the writing on them.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking as the director chooses what so they both have a blind to choose the plays.
Yes.
This is 8/10s at 8.
Yeah.
And they also have a blind reading for the directors.
Yes. And so, you're there fighting. You have no idea who you are going to end up working with. You don't know if it's somebody who's local or not. And so when I won.
Yeah, you did.
I won and got this play that has been a wonderful directing joy to do this. And I'll go to that in a moment. But then finding out it was Wallace, I went, oh, this is great, because we get to work on a project together. And that's how you have a very different relationship with people when you work on making something. And when I asked him, what he wanted out of this, he said a very interesting thing about collaboration and how different the idea of collaborating with other people is than writing, which is very solitary. And so this has been a process. When he came up to the first rehearsal, you were so open. Oh my gosh, it kind of blew all of us out of the water. And he revisited his short story, remade the play. And the play, in 10 minutes, it's very difficult to get even one saturated emotional color. In a way, it's a lot to dive in. You meet the characters, you get into a situation, and something has to happen within that. But the interesting thing about Wallace's play, or one of the interesting things, is that there's emotional turns all the way through it. And so I think that this makes it a dream for the actors. And for me, that was my whole pitch with them, was go down this direction, and here's the turn, right here, bam. Now it's acid humor. Now it's suddenly fearful. Now it's this history that you're having to deal with. Now it's fed-upness. Now it's funny. There's so many turns that it's a tour de force for the 2 actors, really a tour de force.
And who are the actors?
The actors are 2... really stars in the Santa Cruz community. One is Jackson Wolfe, who I've seen perform in the past, and he was in My 3 Angels just recently, and he plays Bunny. And Oscar is played by Frank Widman, who I had the great pleasure of directing in Here After Here, and he, in that show, said the Oscar Wilde line when we did the famous last words. So he did that, and it's been wonderful to watch them grow as well, and to take that risk in a very fast moment to make these emotional turns.
Wow. It's almost like you're describing a haiku for the plays, but then he's got multi-haikus going on in his...
Well, clearly there's a larger play that's here to happen down the road.
One of the characters is made up. His name is Bunny, and he's essentially the last straggler, hanger-on acolyte of Oscar, because Oscar was just surrounded by these people who adored him, but as the trouble in his life increased, they began to sort of disappear. And so I have one guy left, and he's there at his bedside, and he's trying to get Oscar to rally, but Oscar is making a real big production of this. He's turning it into, a very dramatic death scene. In reality, Oscar's demise was really pretty brutal. He died of brain meningitis, and it was a very ugly and long process. So we don't really know what his last words were, but he did say that phrase somewhere along the line. So it is up to Bunny to make sure the world knows that was Oscar Wilde's last words. So it's all about, an artist's legacy and who he has at the end to help him carry on.
I've been to his grave in Paris. I got
right?
a couple of years ago. It's
Père Lachaise.
It's beloved. In fact, they had to put a plexiglass box around it because so many people were kissing it that it was ruining. It's this giant sculpture. It's
an above-ground tomb, is it not? Is it not? Or
I don't know. You can't get very close to it.
Oh, I see.
And people are still kissing the plexiglass. There's lipstick kisses all over it. I mean, it's just incredible how quickly he went from this destitution. If he had survived, if he had lived through it, if he hadn't gotten sick, you know what I mean? Like, would he have been able to see? I'm sure he would have gotten the glory, some of the glory.
He might have been surprised at that. I mean, he was a pariah at the end. I mean, people didn't want to have anything to... I mean, he would be like, I don't know, OJ today, somebody like that who was just so thrown away, essentially. But Bunny is one of those who believed this is a great artist and his work will live.
Yeah.
And, he turned out to be right.
It's kind of interesting how many of the artists at that time period really had to almost die destitute before they were able to be seen and respected and given what they deserved. It seems like we're just more open now to different ideas than at the turn of the last century. And how many artists were trying to break kind of the stereotypical, well, now we're doing French Impressionism, and that's the standard. And then people trying to break out of that,
You're talking about all those artists who died believing they were failures and they were obscurities.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of them did turn out to be that way, but there was a handful, and Oscar Wilde being one of them, that sort of rose to this eternal, immortal kind of iconic status.
But the big difference, I think, with Oscar Wilde is that he actually, before this campaign against him happened, he was regaled, especially here in the United States. People loved his writings, his plays were very successful. He did make it as an artist before he was cut down in the prime.
He took a tour
of
of the United States, I think, in the early 1890s, and he was followed around by newspaper reporters, and they made up all these crazy stories about him because he was this
larger than life,
this crazy creature, and
dandy.
And he kind of played the role of himself as he went all across the country, and there were all kinds of stories about him, eating wild boar raw and stuff. Just crazy sort of urban myths that he kind of attracted, and of course there are many of those from his life as a European as well.
Right. What a fun character to play.
Oh, I think that Frank is having not only a ball with it, but I think it's just really stretched him as an actor. And that's a pleasure to watch happen as an outsider. I think in all of the things, I just want to take a little bit about the whole 8x10s. It's quite stunning that there's 16 playwrights, many of whom are local. It's an enormous effort of heart. I watched all of the auditions. I actually called up. There were very few roles for older women, and there were a couple of fabulous older women who didn't get cast. And I thought, oh, this is amazing to me, the vulnerability of people who are in the fullness of their lives and then coming into audition and then being told no, simply because there's no roles. But I called them up to tell them how great they were. I was very humbled by how many people step out for this audition. And so there's a deep community effort that's involved in making this. And it's fantastic that Playwright's work comes forth. And, and the great thing for an audience is if you're fascinated with one thing or you're not, 10 minutes, next one's coming down the pike.
Yeah, it's really one of the most prominent short play festivals in the country. It's they've had, 200 some odd entries this year from all over the country and some parts of the world even.
So let's just really quickly interject. That happens in June or July, the submittal process. They open it up to...
I believe it was in late spring, so I'm thinking
maybe
May is when they sent out
the request for proposals, a request for plays, and then people send them in, like you're saying, from all over the world.
And they have a committee of people who read them without the names attached, and which is why it's pretty amazing that so many, almost half of the artists, of the playwrights, live in the Monterey Bay area.
Yeah.
Which and that's, I don't know what to make of that, actually, because it is blindly judged. I think it might be because we are used to the 10-minute idea and used to the 10-minute format, so it's not so scary for playwrights in the area. Or maybe there's just a lot of talented people here.
Oh, I think that's what you got. I think that's the latter is correct. If you need more information, you can go to Santa Cruz. Is it the Santa Cruz County? Well, it's SCCAT. So
Santa Cruz County Actors Theater.
Santa Cruz County Actors Theater, SCCAT.org. The Center Street Theater, which is where the Santa Cruz County Actors Theater work, is at 1001 Cooper Street in downtown Santa Cruz. And again...
Center Street.
What did I say? I'm sorry.
Center.
It's so small.
Where the old India Joe's used to be for old
The old India Joe's. There we are.
Right. And you can go there and get the tickets for the 810s at 8 Festival, which is what the Santa Cruz County Actors Theater puts on and have been putting on for 20 years. There's 16 plays this year. There's A and B nights that rotate over the 5-week festival. And the play that we've been talking about, Oscar's Wallpaper, which was written by Wallace Baine and directed by Tandy Beal, is in the A night. You're also joined by The Office Hours, which is by Brian Herneto, directed by Robin Aronson, another wonderful director here in town. The Men's Room Monologues by Wilma M. Chandler and directed by Karen Babbitt. Then we've got Canreckie Blues by Lisa Hadley and directed by Bill Peters. Am I Good by Jean Blasier and directed by Sarah Albertson. Champagne and Chopped Liver by J.M. Eisenman, directed by Peter Gelblum. And Louie by Charlotte Ortiz. And Murder My Most Foul. Anyways, y'all go to the SCCAT.org. You can see all of the plays.
Can I mention real quickly, Wilma Marcus Chandler is the mama of this thing. I mean, she is the founder. She is the artistic director. She is the center around which it all rotates, and she really deserves a lot of credit for getting this rolling and keeping it.
Thank you so much, Wilma. Again, the festival begins January 9th. That's this Friday, and it runs through February 8th. It's 5-week performances.
I'm going to give a shout-out also to Bonnie Ronzio, who has been a central person in keeping this alive as well on all the management part.
It's the two of them who have really kind of held it up for all these years.
I'm just going to go through B Night really quick.
Good.
Like a Lullaby is one of the plays by Greg Rowe, directed by Mike Ryan. Winning by Merciley Jenkins, directed by Ian McRae. Poison Control by Rebecca Gorman O'Neill, directed by Eric Gandolfini. Gandolfi, for Pound by John Boney and directed by Brian Spencer, Port City Blues by Jody McCollman, directed by Al Muller, Surprises by E. Borg, directed by Marnay Taylor, very good, many great directors, obviously, all of them. Countess Befits Her. Countess Befits Her by Steve Spike Wong, directed by Gail Borkowski, and Change of Heart by Vincent Durham, directed by Jerry Geringer. These are all the plays that you're going to be able to see at the 810s at 8 Festival this year for the 20th year in a row. We are so blessed to have this festival, and Tandy Beal, golly lolly, thank you so much for coming up here.
New title. I like it.
See, not only are you the extraordinary dancer, choreographer, playwright, all the wonderful things you do, you're also a director and have been for many years and have directed many, many different plays, which I have the pleasure of discovering every day anew, because you're having your 40th.
Our
40th anniversary.
Does one admit it?
Of Tandy Beal and Company happening this year. So there are many, many wonderful events that are happening. And if you go to tandybeal.com and Tandy Beal and Company on Facebook, you'll be able to see all the events. And there's a top 40 odd things that's being counted down right now on Facebook, so you can learn all the amazing tidbits.
Oddnesses,
right. Such as your partner in crime, John Scoville, was the first employee at Bookshop Santa Cruz?
Yes. You've been reading Facebook.
And Tandy's only 43 years old, so it's really pretty remarkable.
Yeah. She started as a toddler. And then Wallace Baine, golly lolly, you two, boy. I love reading your articles.
Thank you.
I have
Thank you.
for many years, not to date you, but it's been a while, and I hope you keep going, and I hope that this is one of the first of many plays that we get to see, because you write extraordinarily beautiful essays, personal essays. You mix culture and art and literature and ideas of now, the memes of today, in such a beautiful way. You weave them, and I cannot wait to see Oscar's Wallpaper.
Can you say the title of your book?
My book is called The Last Temptation of Lincoln. You can get more information about it on my website, which is wallacebaine.com, which I believe is up and running as we speak, maybe. I think so. So, yeah, and it just came out last week, so...
Bravo.
At Bookshop Santa Cruz?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. You heard it here first, folks. Last Temptation of Lincoln. Please stay tuned for Shamrock. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to my guests. Thank you, Vanya Benavides, for live tweeting and Facebooking during Artists on Art. Enjoy, everybody. Have a great day. Happy New Year and Merry Christmas.